Okay, so we're back, and we are going to finish up today, I think, Phoebe and the General. And then I think we're going to do no, not a vocabulary activity. That's the other class. We're going to start our next story tomorrow. So let's finish up talking about Phoebe and the General, and then we may have, we'll have an assignment after that. And we're on page, at the tail end of page 27, okay? So page 27 is where you need to be in your book, 27, if you're following along. And we stopped off there because at the very end of the page, Phoebe, Mr. Hickey kind of comes up behind her and startles her. And he says, "I've come for my peas." And she says, "Oh, Mr. Hickey, sir, you gave me such a start. I was..." And then she stopped and looked at him. What is the look that she sees on his face? What is it that she notices? Brady?
He looks ill. He looks ill.
He looks ill. She says he looks ill? Or maybe what? Johnny? Frightened. Ill or frightened. She couldn't tell which. Which that startled her too, right? So him coming up behind her startled her. And then when she saw the look on his face, that startled her too. What does he ask her? What's the question he asks her? Johnny?
Which play is his and which play is General Washington?
Yeah, which one's which? What is his excuse for wanting to know? Brady?
He says that he wants to have more peas on his plate.
Yeah, he's like, the general shouldn't have more peas than me, right?
But he wasn't smiling.
And that is, if you haven't figured it out before now, that was probably your first clue. So on 28, Phoebe's like, oh my goodness. She just kind of thought he was being silly. And so she says, "This is the general's and this is yours." And she turns away to fill the salt cellar. Do you guys know what a salt cellar is?
Yeah, it's the thing that you sprinkle salt with.
Yeah. But it's not like a salt shaker. They had like little dishes that were kind of open that they would put salt in, and each person had one at their plate at a fancy dinner. Each person had their own, and it was open, and you would, put your fingers in and sprinkle salt on your own plate, so each person would have theirs. She turned away to fill the salt cellar and turned back, and what did she see when she turns back? Johnny?
Like something shiny going into his pocket.
Yeah, she's like,
He's probably
what's going on?
He's probably the worst murderer ever.
Right, worst murder attempt ever. Although if Phoebe hadn't been such a sharp cookie, maybe he would have gotten away with it. Would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you blasted kids. Isn't that what the old guy always says on Scooby-Doo when the villain is revealed on Scooby-Doo? I would have gotten away for it if it weren't for you meddling kids.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's kind of Phoebe is a little bit sharper than the average person. And she starts picking up the clues. But she hasn't put everything together just yet. She picked up the plate. Was it her imagination, or was there something grainy like sugar on the peas? She looked more closely, but whatever it was seemed to have disappeared. So if you look at something and you think you see something and then you look again and it's not there, what do you usually think?
It's just my mind.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a trick of my mind, a trick of my imagination. Maybe the light was funny on it and I saw a glare. You kind of dismiss it. But she's like, well, and then she's distracted because remember, what has she decided she thinks she knows the way General Washington's going to get murdered? What is that? What does she think is going to happen to him? Tell him.
Poison?
No, what she thinks is going to happen, not what actually happened. Shot through the window. Yeah, she thinks he's going to get shot through the window. So her brain kind of goes back to that because this is what she's focused on, right? And because she's so focused on that, she misses these other clues. She misses these other clues to what's happening. So she enters the dining room. Pompey goes through. She's looking at everybody. Nobody seems nervous. Nobody seems frightened. She can't figure this out. But then she sees there's an empty chair. What is it that makes her think Washington is about to be shot? Brady?
Because Mr. Green, who was what Phoebe was
A little louder.
suspecting, he wasn't in the chair, and so she thought maybe he was hiding outside with the gun.
Right. So Mr. Green was missing, just like Brady said, and then there was a second thing. So she put two things together. So first, Mr. Green was missing. What's the second thing that she thinks, that she notices and thinks that General Washington's about to be shot?
He's sitting by the chair.
Washington is sitting by the window.
Not by the chair.
Yeah, I knew what you meant. Washington's sitting by the window, but what's unusual?
The window's open.
The window was open. So she sees Mr. Green is not in his chair, and she sees that the window is open. So if you've already made up your mind about something, you tend to see things that make you think that that's what's going to happen if you've already made up your mind. So she's like, what's going on? But she doesn't see anything outside, so she still can't figure it out. And then General Washington talks to her about the peas. And she starts putting things together. What prompted her to start thinking of Mr. Hickey as the suspect? What was it that kind of gave it away in her mind? Johnny?
That kind of shiny thing in his pocket, how there's some stuff on the peas. And he knew he would eat that because he knew he likes peas.
Yeah, so Washington says to her, how'd you get peas so early in the season? Washington's excited about having the peas. He says, well, Phoebe, June peas, how did you get them so early in the season? And Phoebe, of course, is going to tell General Washington the truth. She got them from Mr. Hickey. He brought them in. He says they're your favorites. And then what does Washington ask her after she says that? We're at the bottom of 28. Bottom of 28. What does he ask her after she says Mr. Hickey brought the peas in? Brady?
That is his favorite.
Yeah, but what question does he ask her? Tell him.
Where is Mr. Thomas Hickey? I want to thank him.
Where is Mr. Hickey? I want to thank him.
Wait, is that General Gates saying?
Oh, yeah, sorry. General Gates
Yeah.
said that, not Washington. Sorry, I missed that. General Gates, Horatio Gates, by the way, was his first name. Little American history trivia there for you. And Mr. Gates chimes in with them. They're my favorite too. Where is Mr. Hickey? I want to thank him. And that's when Phoebe goes, wait a minute. And it says on 29, and this is where the climax hits. So you remember when we talk about the plot pyramid, and we talk about how, you've got the setup, and then the rising actions, a little bit like a roller coaster. You're going up, 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 up. The suspense, whatever it is, right, is building to whatever it's going to be. And then the climax is you're sitting at the top of that hill, right? And this is it right here. And it's kind of funny because the way it's written, you can kind of feel it. You can kind of feel Phoebe's tension and how everything happens all at once. I feel like the author does a really good job of communicating, that feeling that you have when like lots of things are happening all at the same time. I think the author does a really good job of communicating that. Let me read that out loud because I think that you guys are really going to get a lot out of it if you hear it as well.
Yeah.
Then, in a flash, it came to her who she was looking for. Mr. Green wasn't hiding outside the window to shoot at the general. The person who was trying to kill him was here, in the kitchen. Phoebe stood still like a stone, the plate still in her hands. She saw Hickey again. Thomas Hickey. laughing and teasing, bringing her candy and ribbons and seed for her chickens, and then bringing June peas for the general and sprinkling them with poison. T was for Thomas, member of General Washington's bodyguard. Dun, dun, dun. Right?
Yeah. You put an extra, you said, Phoebe stood still like a stone. It just says Phoebe stood like a stone.
Oh, well, there you go. Whatever. And she figures it out. Like all at once, it kind of hits her. Have you ever had that happen where you've had like lots of things go through your mind all at once and Phoebe's like, whoa, what do I do? What do I do? She's holding the plate. She turns around and she screams at Pompey. What does she tell Pompey to do? She hollers at Pompey. What does she tell him to do? Tell him?
Run.
To run and what?
Get my father.
And go get my father. Go get my dad. Go get my father. Poppy's like, what? Go, Sam Francis, go. She stamped her foot, and it says Pompey had never heard Phoebe sound like that before. Like, so obviously Phoebe is a calm person usually, so the fact that she's getting super agitated is unusual, right? And everyone, she kind of like puts a freeze on everybody in the room, right? Because Phoebe is this young woman who is very competent. She's good at her job. Obviously, the general likes her. Everybody likes her. She's doing what she's supposed to do. And all of a sudden, she kind of goes nuts. Like, that's not what we're expecting here, right? And then she accuses Thomas Hickey. She says, General Washington, she cried, Mr. Hickey has put poison in your dinner. I saw him. And then, of course, everybody around the table goes, you know, the collective gasp.
And they're like,
What is General Gates's response to her statement? Brady?
what jest is this?
What jest is this? What does that mean? What's a jest? Anybody know? That's a fun word. Do you know what it means, a jest?
No.
It's another word for a joke. So basically, General Gates is saying, is this some kind of joke? This is not a funny joke, Phoebe. He gets up, he reaches for the plate. What does Phoebe do before General Gates can get the plate?
Yeet.
She yeets it out the window. Yes, she does. She yeets it out the window. And now everybody says the dining room's in an uproar. Like everybody's going kind of nuts. Everybody's going kind of nuts. Some people ran to protect Washington. Some people were doing this. Some people were doing that. I want you to think about, because what are our themes? We've already talked about it, but our two themes are, Talon?
Trust and courage.
Trust and courage. So where do both of those things come in on this page? What does Phoebe do that's courageous? Johnny?
She throws the food out the window.
She throws the food out the window.
She's confident that she's right.
She's confident that she's right, but she has just accused a member of General Washington's personal bodyguard. That's kind of a big deal. That's like if I walked up to the White House and accused one of the Secret Service agents of trying to assassinate the president. That's the equivalent. This is a person that's paid and paid well to protect the general. So it takes a lot of courage on Phoebe's part to accuse him. Where does the trust come in? Do they believe her at first? No.
But when the hens start dying from eating the peas, they do.
That's exactly right, which happens on the next page. The hens start dying. Who notices the hens dying first? Brady?
General Gates.
General Gates notices. He looks out the window, notices the chickens in the yard, and two of them were already what? Dead. That was a fast-acting poison. It was probably cyanide, actually. I'm not sure how all this works. It's a kind of poison. Two of them were already dead, and then the third one, they watched him die, right? They watched that third chicken die. General Gates starts bellowing again. Bellowing is another word for yelling. Get Hickey. Thomas Hickey comes in. What's the look on his face now? Brady?
Pale white with terror.
White with terror. Have you ever gone, like you've been so scared you've kind of gone pale? Yeah. I mean, I'm pale all the time. But I can get paler. Yeah. He's afraid because he knows what's going to happen to him. What happens to people who do that kind of thing?
Don't they get executed?
Yeah. Yeah. Generally back then they would be executed either by being shot or hanged. Yeah. So he knows what's about to happen to him. And Sam Francis gets there right after because Pompey had listened to her and had gone to get her dad. Now, can you imagine being a 13-year-old girl in that kind of situation? Like all that tension and all that tension and all that tension, and you finally figure it out and just kind of, can you imagine like she might be in a little bit of shock?
Yeah.
Like who would you want in a situation like that? You know, I want my mommy. I want my daddy. Somebody come and help me. This was hard and I'm done now and I'm going to collapse any second now, right? Have you ever done something really hard and you were really proud of yourself, but when it was over, you were like, oh, I'm done. That's kind of, I think, the reaction Phoebe's getting right here. And what does her dad say to her? This is really cool. What does he say to her? Johnny?
It's nice to know people whom I can trust.
That's actually what Washington says to Phoebe. What does Phoebe's dad say to her? Talon?
Well done, daughter. Well done.
Well done. You did a good job. Well done. I mean, it's kind of an understatement. Like, she did a spectacular job. She saved General Washington. It's kind of a big deal. But still, just having your dad come up to you and go, good job. Or somebody you admire a lot. Think about somebody you admire a lot. Somebody that whose good opinion matters to you. Right? When they give you a compliment, how does that make you feel?
Good.
It makes you feel really good. And Phoebe is, wow. And then George Washington thanks them. And like Johnny said, it's nice to know people whom I can trust. And then, of course, you know, the Americans go on to win the Revolutionary War. And in 1783, General Washington gave a victory party. And where did he give his victory party at? Talon?
Queen's Head.
The Queen's Head Tavern. He honored Samuel Francis by giving it at the Queen's Head Tavern. And what did he do when he became president, Brady?
Made Samuel Francis his official steward.
Made Samuel Francis his official steward. That would be the man who takes care of all the household happenings. Kind of like a little bit like a butler. Not quite, but a little bit like a butler. Sam Francis had that job until 1796. So he kept the job as the White House steward for quite a long time. Thomas Hickey, what happened to him? What happened to Thomas Hickey according to our book? Talon?
He got hanged.
He was hanged. He was hanged publicly. By the way, hangings were usually public and anybody could come and watch. It was some good entertainment for the day. What?
Why?
I'm not even kidding. It's a thing. It's real.
Why?
History is weird. History is weird. Everybody turned out to watch. And nobody really knows what happened to Phoebe after that.
Maybe she died because...
Well, I mean, she probably went and lived her life or whatever. But we do know that she was a spy. And there we have it. It's kind of interesting because this story has some facts and some fiction kind of all mixed together in it. So here's what we know are actual facts. George Washington did go on to lead the American army to victory. The colonists did win their freedom. We know this from history, that George Washington held his victory party at the Queen's Head Tavern. We know that from history. We know that Samuel Francis became Washington's steward, and we know that Thomas Hickey got put to death. What we do not know, it is not documented that the reason he was executed was because of the assassination attempt. So officially, historically, we don't know why Thomas Hickey was executed officially. So that's why when you're reading a story that's like this, that kind of blends fact and fiction together, you have to be careful to not read it as truth. Let me give you an example. How many of you guys have seen the movie The Greatest Showman?
Yes. I didn't get to finish it, but I did watch
It's
some
one of
it.
Bethy's favorite movies. It's about P.T. Barnum. Do you know who that is?
Yes.
He was one of the men who started, well, he started a circus, and it ended up as Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. Now, they don't exist anymore, but these circuses would travel all over the U.S. That movie is a fun movie, and P.T. Barnum was a real person, and his wife Charity was a real person, and he really had 2 little girls. But pretty much everything else was made up in that movie. For one thing, P.T. Barnum would have never set foot in a bar. He was 100% against alcohol. So in fact, he was what you call a teetotaler, and he worked for Prohibition. So he would have never set foot in a bar or had drinks because he didn't drink at all. He never had an affair with Jenny Lind, any of that stuff, right? And a lot of people watched that movie, and it was a good movie, and it was a fun movie. And one of the things I said to Wes when it was over was, I wish that they had just picked a different name and made it totally pretend through the whole thing, because so much of it wasn't historically accurate that people are going to think this was the real P.T. Barnum, and it wasn't. And it's a little bit like that in stories like this, where you have to be careful as you're reading it not to take it all as fact, because some of the things in this story are fact and some of them are not. That's why we call it historical fiction. Very good. Okay, we're going to stop there, and I'm going to turn the video off, and then we are going to get ready for history.